Hi there. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Crystal Wittevrongel, collaborating with Common Sense Calgary, here today with John Garden, who is running for City Council in Ward 2 in Calgary's upcoming election. John, thank you so much for joining me today.
No, thank you for having me on.
Well, I'd love to hear more about you and your background and what you would be bringing with you to City Council.
Um, I've had numerous lives, so where do you want to start? You know, I started working for my dad and his small business in Edmonton as a concrete finisher. Went working rigs when I was 18. Be more specific, I actually worked for a cementing company that cemented casing on the rigs. Did that for 10 years. Met my wife. It was a tough job, so she said, you need to go back to university, get an engineering degree. So I did that. Graduated from USC in 1993. We've had two kids, Josh and Rebecca. Rebecca's 33 next month. Josh is 29. Both fine young adults, as near as we can tell. I've ran my own engineering firm here in Calgary for 30 plus years. Right from starting work in the field to managing large drilling and completion projects in Western Canada, and then eventually graduated into I don't know if it's a graduate or what it was, but I ended up doing a large drilling project in Albania, drilling project in Ukraine, and then project in Texas, project in Trinidad. Started a wildfire deployment company. So kind of done a lot of different stuff, and this is let's see if I can start giving back in a bigger way to my community.
Hmm. And so what's bringing you to City Council? What's the drive? What are you seeing?
Well, City Hall's really lost my faith and trust in them right now. There's just
Hmm.
things going on. Having run a successful business for 30 years, well, I think it's successful, but looking at the services we're receiving for our taxes, I just don't feel we're getting any fiscal responsibility with the city right now, and I want to find out
Hmm.
where what are they actually doing for us. Where our taxes are going up. We've got money in the bank, and we continue to increase taxes, and I feel service levels are going down. As a professional engineer, I have to always worry first about what's in the public interest, and public safety right now I think is at an all-time low. Um,
Hmm.
I don't know. I just feel I don't want to ride the train. I hit a pothole with my car. That's a safety issue. I've almost been hit on Stony Trail because people are putting potholes. The blanket rezoning, is a big one for me because I see it as a public safety issue. It's not just you know, a, a
Hmm.
short-term fix to affordability, but I just think um, it's a public safety issue in that there's so little parking. The roads are so tight in these neighborhoods that we're building these units that it's going to be hard to get fire trucks in, police, EMS.
Hmm.
I think that's kind of what got me here.
Yeah. And those are the things that really I'm hearing across the board as well, and the priorities for Calgarians in this election as well. And
Hmm.
so on the issue of property taxes, if you are elected to city council, what is going to be your approach to property taxes?
Well, I think the very first thing, like I'm looking at the current, what I'm going to have to contend with in the next budgets that we're already, we've got a 5.4% increase in taxes projected when we've already had a budget surplus through the year. As a new councillor, I'm going to have to contend with that increase in taxes when we've actually already seen an increase in taxes strictly due to inflation. My taxes have gone up over
Hmm.
30% in the last 2 years, and that's strictly due to inflation, and that's not due to the intrinsic value of my home.
Hmm.
So I look at it and say, why do we need this when we've actually got money in the bank and our services are starting to go down? Or starting, they're going down.
Hmm. So would you be in favor of a tax cut or a freeze of sorts?
I think an initial freeze first. What
Hmm.
I'm hearing from the residents in the ward, they don't, they're not against paying taxes, but they're against it if their level of services are going down. And we're
Hmm.
seeing that in just the most simplest of manners right now. You know, Nolan Hill, you know, Foxtail's a big thing for them, and we can't control it, which is fine. But there's two different sets of rules as to how the residents have to dispose of Foxtail and the city does. It's a little thing, but it's the most basic of services that we're not
Hmm.
paying attention to.
Hmm. Absolutely. And that's one of the other things is the spending and where's the spending going. And I know a lot of folks are having to deal with, not seeing services be the level
Mhm.
that they'd like, but yet feeling that the city is spending too much. What is your perspective on the way that the city spends currently?
I just don't think there's coordination and communication between the different departments. We're seeing
Hmm.
oftentimes, you know, two or three different repairs being done to something that if one crew had been out, or if a team went out and said, we're going to fix all of this at one time instead of let's fix this and then send somebody else in, a couple of weeks later. And there just seems to be no coordination or communication inside of City Hall, and
Hmm.
and the residents are seeing it. It's not like they're
Yeah.
just, um, you know, tilting of windmills. They're actually seeing this happen. That they're trying to fix a pothole numerous times and they never seem to quite get it right.
Hmm. And I mean, that kind of comes also back to what the core role of city government is. And some folks believe that the city in recent years has stepped outside of its core functions and has taken on things or is spending on things that aren't, in its direct mandate. So, from your perspective, what is the core function of city council and city government?
Well, when I'm talking to the residents, it's I just tell them I'm here to fix potholes and make sure they get water. Um, the core belief of anywhere I've ever worked in the world, the people are concerned about three things: food, family, shelter. And so our job as city councilors is to make sure that they don't have to worry about the other things. Like, is water going to make it to my house? Is my toilet going to flush? Or is there going to be parking on the roads? Are the roads going to be good enough to drive on? Um, and I think city council's lost that goal and objective, is to just to make our lives simple and comfortable, and let us worry about the things that are important. As a family, worry about the things that are important.
Hmm. And when we see things like a budget surplus of $200 million, that we expect to see thereabouts this year, what do you think should be done when we have surpluses? Should it be put into a reserve fund or perhaps rebated to taxpayers?
And that's a really good question. I think that we've let infrastructure and safety fall down so much over the past 10 years. We've averaged over the last 10 years $158 million per year of the
Hmm.
surplus. So realistically, we have, between, depends on how you interpret the books, we have a $1.4 billion, I believe, cash surplus. We've seen services degrade, the fire department, with the police, with the simplest of infrastructure. So should we be, dipping into that? And they call it a rainy day fund, but I think it's starting to pour pretty hard right now. I think we need to, make sure that the firefighters have equipment, that we have police are properly, you know, equipped, and we have new police stations open up in some of the new neighborhoods that we've got in the Northwest here. Um, I don't know. What are we doing with that surplus, and what are we going to do with it? And
Hmm.
and I
Hmm.
can't understand it in the financials. I've got a pretty good grip on how to run a business, and I can't find anywhere in the financials what the plans are for it. I
Hmm.
don't know. It's just it's really frustrating.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned previously, the food and family and safety and these things that are really important.
Mm-hmm.
And housing is also something that's very
Mm-hmm.
important to all Calgarians. And so most people would say that they agree with affordable housing. And so what that means may differ. What does affordable housing mean to you, and what role should the city play in that?
Well, and the Calgary city of Calgary does own a company that provides low rental housing. Again, this is something that we can't see in the financials. They've consolidated all the financial statements of the Calgary Housing Corporation, so we really don't know. What does affordable housing look like to the city of Calgary? Like the city itself and the actual corporation that manages all the buildings. And we're seeing. I don't believe that the blanket rezoning that we're seeing is doing anything, maybe minor, a small percentage drop in rental prices. And now we're starting to see, we've had such an explosion on the price of properties in the city of Calgary. we're starting to see an erosion of the value of people's homes.
Mm-hmm.
So you know, people my age, we're relying on our homes as part of our retirement, and now we're seeing that value being degraded because of a influx of all cheaper, what they're saying is cheaper housing, and it ends up being um, sold and rented at market prices. So are we
Mm-hmm.
really building affordable housing with the blanket rezoning? I don't think so. I
And
don't know if
so
that was really a great answer, but
no, it was good. And so when we're thinking about low income Calgarians or supporting low income Calgarians, do you see the city as having a role with subsidizing housing more so than kind of making sure that the red tape is out of the way to get more housing built quicker so that folks can have access to that housing?
yeah, and I think getting the bureaucracy and the red tape out of the way is going to contribute to more affordable housing. Taking months or whatever weeks or whatever the time frame is, depending on the project, it just costs inflates the price of a house. Um,
Hmm.
what are we? What's the city of Calgary actually? What are we selling our land assets for out of our land bank? What are we selling those for to the developers? Should we be
Hmm.
looking at not necessarily at a loss, but making it a little more affordable for the developers so that we're not paying $300,000 for a small lot in some of the newer neighborhoods. No, I don't think we should be subsidizing it. I think
Hmm.
there's um, not-for-profits and other groups that I think are better at managing properties in the city of Calgary. We can't even fill a pothole. What makes us think we can run a house, a rental
Hmm.
house?
Yeah. And you mentioned the blanket rezoning policy. There's been quite a bit of debate about that.
Mm-hmm.
Most folks that I've heard from are in strong opposition to it, but then you have others who do see the merits of such a policy. What do you plan to do regarding that policy if you're elected to city council?
Well, I believe that if it's as easy as it was for the city to put a blanket over top of the entire city for rezoning, it should be just as simple to remove it. With all the consultation that the city did, and almost 80% of the people in Ward 2 and around the city said don't vote for it, but the city votes for it. Like the
Hmm.
council votes for it. So they're not listening, and it's kind of frightening. But
Hmm.
anecdotally, I've got a friend that's on city council in Regina, and he called me a couple of weeks ago and asked me what's going on here with it, and he says same thing's going on in Regina. So what's the actual what's our end game on this? Is it
Hmm.
affordable housing, or is it just more housing that's going to come onto the market at market prices?
Hmm.
So I
And
think it's got to
so,
go. I say
yeah,
forward, Pete.
okay.
I'm sorry. Sorry for interrupting.
Okay. And so for those Calgarians in Ward 2 or just kind of more broadly who are feeling very disillusioned by the city in that they weren't listened to or heard or just kind of cast aside, what will
Mhm.
you do to rebuild trust with those people if you're in city council?
Well, I think the very first thing we do, like in oil and gas in my career, if I wanted to drill a well or work on a well anywhere in Alberta, well, basically Western Canada, I had to notify all the residents within a certain area of the project, and we need to do that same thing. I think
Hmm.
ultimately it will reduce our costs, it will reduce red tape, it will reduce the time it takes to get projects approved. In that, at least if you go into a neighborhood where they're going to put in, a new fourplex or even an infill, if the residents are being informed and they understand what's going on and their voices are heard, then at least you can address their concerns. So I think it needs to be a door-to-door policy and not just put a sign
Hmm.
up on a fence that says, yeah, we're doing this, give us a call. Call
Hmm.
311. It's just like, seriously, like you're affecting people's, you know, safety and livelihood and investments. So I think I don't know if it's going to be a cheap fix, but I think that is what has to happen. There has to be better communication between the residents and the city hall, and that's the job as a counselor, is to make sure that you know we get both sides heard.
Hmm. And so, for large policies like this that impact everybody in the future, would you see this being something that should go to a plebiscite? Would you be in favor of that?
Um, I think it's something that can be addressed, at the grassroots level. I don't know if we would have to go that far as to a plebiscite. Um,
Hmm.
if it's very controversial, and it's, we've got, clear divisions, it's a 50-50-50 split. I think it would need to go to a plebiscite. In the
Hmm.
in the case of the blanket rezoning, when you've got, one of the largest public hearings in the city of Calgary's history, that nobody listens to them, and such a large percentage were opposed to it, but it still
Hmm.
happens. I think that's a clear cut mandate for city council to say, geez, you know what, this is just really a bad idea.
Hmm. Yeah.
And yet they still voted to approve it.
And that goes to kind of a bit of a history of doing that with city council, where we had the city's chief financial officer advising against moving forward on these major projects. So there's the
Mm-hmm.
four big projects:
Mm-hmm.
Foothills Fieldhouse, the Arts Commons, the arena, and the BMO expansion. And they went ahead and did it anyways, did all four when they had been told that it was a significant financial risk by the CFO. What are your thoughts on how that played out?
Yeah, that's kind of a tough one. When the new sports center was, you know, the goalposts were moved on that one when, the new city council got in 2021, and the guy, the Calgary Sports and Entertainment just took one look at the new deal and said, "Nah, we're out." That's how easy
Hmm.
capital is. You know, private capital is to leave a project. It's just that simple. Um,
Hmm.
with the other examples, like with the field house, for instance, why aren't we looking for, a private donor, or, you know, a partner to help with this so that we get it done? I mean, it's been years that it's been going nowhere.
Hmm.
So I think city council needs to be held accountable for, that bureaucracy and red tape, and not having the imagination or forethought to actually make some of these things go.
Hmm. And that leads me to thinking about the Green Line, which is also something that is an ongoing saga
Mm-hmm.
and is now purported to cost much more than previously planned, and service less distance and less Calgarians. What do you think about the Green Line LRT and what should be done if you're in city council?
Well, I think, we need to pay attention to the most simplest of services and needs and safety right now. We can't even keep our C train safe.
Hmm.
Talking with some of the residents in Ward 2, they've been pepper sprayed on the train, they've been assaulted on the train, they've seen, all sorts of issues on the train and on public transit. It's become unreliable. The few times I've actually taken it in the last few years, I'm like, why are you chasing me off the train and putting me on a bus and taking me downtown? Like, but this isn't this isn't reliable. So if we can't get that basic service done, you know, and frankly, like downtown right now, it's, we've got empty buildings. Like, do we really need a train to go into downtown when I don't understand the ridership numbers? Is it really going to have that many people riding the train? I'm not trying to slight the need for it. And when I get in, I'll be talking to the other councillors in the ward that are affected by the Green Line, and see what their thoughts are, see what their residents' thoughts are. I think
Hmm.
what's happening as well is that the city, um, I don't know if they're afraid, or if they think they know better, but we need a conversation between the city and the province. There's just a continual lack of communication between the city and the province.
Hmm.
And I call it's called the sunk cost fallacy. Like, we've got however much money sunk into this thing. Are we going to continue to throw good money after bad? I've got friends that have looked at the underground portion of the Green Line and gone, do we not realize we live on, how high the water table is, and all these other things? And all I hear back from the proponents is, oh yeah, well, they figured out how to do it in Vancouver, under the Fraser River. They know how to do it in New York. And I'm like, well, I think we need a better study here, and come up with a better solution than where we're at right now.
Hmm. And you mentioned, the safety of our existing transit, and that's definitely a concern for many Calgarians. What do you think about the current transit strategy as it relates to safety?
Do we have one? You know, like, I worked down, I've worked downtown for a long, long time. It would be easier for me and simpler for me to take a train, but I would rather drive and pay for parking because I don't feel safe getting off at the train stations. Um, I, I don't know. Do we need more? And it's all rhetorical questions. Do we need more, you know, patrols? I get frustrated when there's, one kiosk to buy a train ticket. Like, do we need a better system for making sure that people are paying? I don't know. There's so many moving parts to it, but I think first things first, we need to address the safety of it so we can start getting ridership up.
Hmm. And so would you see that being like more uniformed officers or peace officers being present, or what would address some of the safety aspect?
Well, I think more uniform transit officers would be a great place to start. Um,
Hmm.
Maybe peace officers. I don't know. I think we need to, clean up the stations as well. Like I said, I'm the one that I've most frequented is on Seventh Avenue, and I think it's about Second or Third Street, between Second and Third Street. I don't even want to walk on that during the day. It's
Hmm.
I just don't feel safe. So
Hmm.
let's get this stuff cleaned up, and let's make sure that people
Hmm.
are actually paying to use the transit system and make it more affordable.
Hmm. And the safety aspect in transit also, speaks to a bigger issue with safety downtown, and some of the other issues that we've seen, and some of the debate that we've seen about the supervised consumption site that's been at the Sheldon Schumer Clinic downtown. Um, what are your thoughts on that? Should it be closed? Should it be moved?
Oh, that's a provincial matter. You know, I think the province has, got some ideas of what they want to do, and I think we need to get into lockstep with them on this. And again, city council isn't talking to, the Alberta government to see what the game plan is. I think
Hmm.
personally, I really don't like it. I've had to go I went to the Sheldon Streamer 2 years ago for a health issue. I'm like, I don't want to go in there either. Like it just didn't feel safe. At like 8 o'clock at night, I'm going into a hospital, and at the time it was a reasonably serious health issue for myself, but
Hmm.
there's all this other unsafe activity going on. I'm like, what do we do with it? I think what's going to happen is if we close it, it's just going to get displaced to another area of Calgary. We're just moving it from one problem area to another. So
Hmm.
should I close it? I think we need to close it. I think we need to address the mental health and the physical issues that are going on with that addiction.
Hmm.
And that's a discussion again with, the provincial government. I think we need some help with it. I don't think it's something we can tackle ourselves as a city.
Hmm. Well, and that speaks to the need to strengthen the relationship with the provincial government because, like you said, that is a provincial jurisdiction when we're talking about health or mental health and addictions. And so, what role would you see yourself playing in city council to build trust back with the provincial government?
Well, in my experience, I've had to work with multidisciplinary teams around the world, and not only, you know, whatever different disciplines as far as technical, but also regulatory and political things that are going on in all these different jurisdictions I've been in. So I think you need to sit down and actually start a dialogue and open up the door and do something constructive. I don't think there's
Hmm.
anything constructive going on. Um, for me, I think what council's missing um, is leadership and consistency on communication and decisions that are being made on behalf of the people of the ward. Um, that you've got to sit back. Leadership doesn't just mean you point fingers and say do this, do that. It means bringing out the best of people, and I don't think
Hmm.
we're doing that. I think the egos are getting in the way, and I know what's right. And for me, it's sit down and let's do what's right for the project, not what's right
Hmm.
for the individual.
Yeah. Well, and the lack of leadership is something that Calgarians also reported when we were dealing with the water main break in 2024.
Hmm.
Lots of people were greatly impacted by that. The whole city, was impacted by that in some way, shape, or form. What are your thoughts on how that whole thing was managed? Everything from risk management through communications.
Well, there should have been a better maintenance program for that years ago. And
Hmm.
then when we did have an issue with it, um, we've got some of the best pipeline engineers in the world working in downtown Calgary, and they weren't consulted on this. It, you
Hmm.
know, why aren't we? And I'm not advocating that we contract, everything out at the city, but I'm like, couldn't we have brought in some experts and said, here's what we can do to fix this, and here's what we can do to make sure that it, you know, continues to function in the next, 5 to 10 years. But no,
Hmm.
we just dug it up and found a hole, and then tried to find other holes. And I don't think it was handled all that clearly, and the communication was, I think, kind of poorly managed as well. We really didn't know,
Hmm.
and yeah, it just was. I think it was handled, it was managed, but I think it was ultimately mismanaged.
Hmm. And what would you do differently with regards to prioritizing critical infrastructure in the future?
I think it's got to be number one. Um,
Hmm.
Roads, sewer, water, transit. And that's all part to me. That's all parts of critical infrastructure, and I don't
Hmm.
believe we've been addressing it. You know.
Yeah. Hmm. I agree. And so this election is interesting for a number of reasons, but one of which is that we're seeing political parties at the municipal level for
Mhm.
the first time. Are you part of any of these parties? And if so, what does that mean for your campaign and your ward?
Um, so I am. I'm with the Better Calgary Party. Um,
Hmm.
when I chose the party, they didn't chose me, so I wasn't just appointed. It was, a democratic process where I had to, put my name in, make a presentation. There was a lot more stringent um, process to it. I had to background check, which is standard. Um, Financial records. I had to do a financial check. I had to provide, you know, references. I had to actually sit down and make sure that the core values that the party had stood for
Hmm.
were mine as well. And then we have no mayoral candidate, so we don't have a leader. Like, there is nobody that's
Hmm.
behind us saying you need to do this, you need to do that. What it does is it gives us a platform of like-minded individuals, and we're saying, yeah, you're a conservative choice.
Hmm.
And conservative to me means, conservative fiscally, conservative on the risk side, conservative on our infrastructure. Let's conserve and make sure all of these things are working together. And it's not a political ideology. It's just, you know, a common sense approach to how, the city, I think, should be managed. I don't feel that there's a place in civic politics for provincial or federal parties participating in the process,
Hmm.
and we have no connection with any other provincial or federal party.
Hmm.
Just a group of us, we all discuss how our campaigns are going and what we need to do. So I have nobody that's telling me how to run my campaign, how to, depend on them for anything. I am running an independent campaign, but with, some moral support from the other candidates I'm running with.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, John, this has really been a great conversation, and I've
Okay.
enjoyed hearing your perspectives. But before we wrap up, is there
Sure.
anything you'd like to leave behind with our viewers today?
Yeah, I just, like I said, I've lost faith and trust in the city. I think we need strong leadership. We need accountability. We need integrity. As a professional engineer, my paramount um, goal is maintaining, public trust and safety and the environment. So
Hmm.
with morals and ethics that you know don't bring into question decisions.
Hmm. Yes. Well, thank you so much for your time today. And to our viewers, thank you for tuning in. And please stay engaged, stay informed, and get out and vote. We need to see higher voter turnout. We need your voice. So please get out and vote. John, thank you again for
Great.
being with me here today.
Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.